Okay, today I'm going to show you how to integrate the above and the below when you start a veil painting. Because if you're working like I am with 3 primary colors, you may end up with different spaces, and that's good and natural, but at some point we need to make the spaces come together and get integrated as one. So let's try to work on that today. I'm going to start with just a little bit of yellow as usual, and I will get actually a lot of yellow on my brush from the side of the plate. And the first thing I'm going to do is try to increase some of the green areas. So that means just going over the places where yellow and blue have come together. And then I'll go on and increase the reds and the blues too. Now I'm going to be working with what I call characterization of a space. And what does that mean? It means that you look at a certain flat space that you've created and try to give it a sense of uniqueness or character. And the way to do that is by deepening something in the space gradually. You can't just go completely to a dark red from a light red, or it's going to look unnatural. But you can push the color in a way that will be one value deeper. And as I'm doing this, I try to imagine that I'm maybe walking down a staircase, and I've started with the top and I'm working my way one step down. I don't go from the middle of the staircase suddenly to the bottom, but I just take it one level at a time. And this way you can judge if your color is just slightly deeper than it was before. And always you'll notice when I wet a surface, it's going to look slightly deeper. And when it dries, it'll be a little bit lighter because that's the nature of the color. Let's try working a little bit with the blue. And again, last time I swept upwards to try to integrate the top and the bottom together in one composition, and this is good. Now sometimes artists will take their picture and turn it in order to see where the integration really needs to come or happen. And so you can see that if I turn this composition on its side now, we can tell that there's a sort of cupping gesture by virtue of the fact that I just brought this blue from down below working towards the top. And now I have a surround, a sort of enveloping of blue, which is quite nice, that sweeps throughout the composition. And here we see the reds that are reaching upwards with the yellows, and that also works very nicely. You may decide that you want to work on your picture in a different direction for a while, and that's perfectly acceptable in my mind. But I don't suggest that you keep flipping it every 15 minutes. Work with it for maybe the rest of the time in a new direction, or at least for a session or two, so that you don't get too sanguine with the way you approach your composition. So let's work with the painting in this direction a little bit and develop the orange a bit. How we're going to do that is by mixing a little bit of color onto the brush, and I usually dry off the ferrule, the metal part of the brush, so it doesn't drip as much. And then I'm going to apply some yellow. And you can see that's creating a nice orange there. And I can ask myself, where else could I imagine orange coming? And I think over here is kind of a nice area. And let's keep going a little bit with the yellow. Maybe we'll put it in here with some greens. Now, if you do a lot of large spaces on your veil painting, then you're going to have to let it dry before you apply any more paint. Otherwise, you're going to be painting wet on wet, and veil painting is dry layers, or layers of wet watercolor on dry paper, I should say. So it's not applying wet watercolor to wet layers. It must be dry in between, and that's why I use a little hairdryer to speed it up. Another tip I can tell you about veil painting is that a lot of times you'll notice that I'm sitting when I'm doing these demonstrations, and that's mainly because I want you to look mostly at the painting, and you don't really need to see me except for my hand and brush. But when I paint by myself, I actually like to orient myself to the painting so that the painting is directly filling my chest and respiratory and digestive area. And that color exposure feels very healthful for the human organism and actually helps you to breathe in a way that is calming and very healing, really. But for now, I'm going to stand off to the side so that you can see better. And let's take a little bit of blue and look what we can do with the blue. We talked about characterizing the blue by creating just a deeper sense of blue each time. And maybe that value gets deeper within the color of blue itself or whatever color that you're doing, but it might also come in a new area. And these shapes that I'm doing are very organic. They're nondescript. They don't have edges, sides necessarily, or angles. But sometimes people do veil paintings that are very angular and sheath-like. It's a different style. And there are several different schools of veil painting. I was trained in the Essenza school, Beppe Essenza, which is probably a very free method of application. Not so many rules, but mainly you're just trying to create a veil painting composition that is harmonious and balanced, not causing the viewer too much work to look at, but just rather a healing sense of beautiful color. And you can tell in your own feeling how it is for you. You'll notice where it feels imbalanced, where it might need more color because of the last veil that you did. Over here, then you might feel like, okay, I want to get a little more orange over here, so I'll apply red. But the rules are to follow your own feelings. So as the Danish would say, taste and comfort cannot be discussed. And that means that it's really up to you. But I will say this, if you find yourself getting critical about your work, then just stop and enjoy the simple beauty of the colors. Let them enrich you and come back to it later when you have a more objective experience.